Keys, phone, mask. Face coverings have already become a part of daily life during the pandemic, and now we're about to see much more of them. From July the 24th, they'll be compulsory in shops. Those who fail to comply will face a fine of up to $125. The move brings England in line with Scotland and other major European nations, including Spain and Italy. It's been mandatory to wear masks on public transport for some time, but there's been little consistency elsewhere.
We want to give people more confidence to shop safely and enhance protections for those who work in shops. Both of these can be done by the use of face coverings.
Ministers have been sending mixed messages on masks for months. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, started regularly wearing one only a few days ago, while the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, met her French counterpart wearing one, but was later seen inside without one. Meanwhile, elusive street artist Banksy, who spent his career hiding behind a very different mask, had his own coronavirus statement to make, stenciling a London Underground train with a message to cover up, complete with sneezing rodents. There were early concerns coverings could lead to a build-up of the virus inside the masks, or that people would be more inclined to ignore social distancing rules or hygiene standards. We now know coverings greatly reduce the risk of people with the virus from spreading it. The government also hopes wearing masks will inspire confidence among shoppers to be out spending again. For some retailers, there's a silver lining in making masks mandatory. They were quick to spot a gap in the market, and they've run with it.
Very good news, because I think they've done a good thing with everyone wearing masks. And obviously, with that, our business is going to be up.
Enforcement will be largely down to the police, but shop workers and even other shoppers are expected to encourage the policy. By extension, questions are already being asked about masks in schools and workplaces. The government says its plans are evolving. Opposition MPs fear the government's making up its rules on masks as it goes along. Neave Barker, Al Jazeera, London.
Wafa Al-Sadr is a professor of epidemiology and medicine at Columbia University. She's also the director of the Global Health Initiative at the university's Mailman School of Public Health. She joins us now from New York via Skype. Madam, thank you for joining us here on Al Jazeera. We can see in the UK, for example, it's taken the government a long time to make masks mandatory, at least in certain places like shops now. And we see that in many other parts of the world, it has become a political issue. Why is that? And let's, I guess, start from where you're talking to us from, which is the United States.
Yes, and first of all, I applaud the UK in taking this important step forward, and it's a wise decision and maybe a bit overdue. But I think in the US, unfortunately, the issue of wearing masks has become a political issue. It seems to me that the U.S. population is now divided into one group that is consistently wearing masks and understands and appreciates the importance of wearing a mask at the time when we are the country with the largest numbers of cases reported currently. And at the same time, there are others on the other side of the political spectrum who feel that wearing a mask is an infringement on their rights as individuals. And unfortunately, many of these individuals are inadvertently and unknowingly fueling a further spread of the SARS virus.
It's funny, though, because in other parts of the world, we see that there often is a culture of wearing masks, especially in parts of Asia, but not just there. What else do you think comes into play when some nations, some cultures actually embrace the idea of being able to protect themselves and others, even if it is just with a mask?
Well, in this context, I believe that wearing a mask in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic is a sign of respect. It's a sign of it's a sign of appreciation of one's own health as well as the health of our community members. And what we're seeing is in some countries, there's a longer history and tradition of wearing masks for a variety of different reasons. For example, in many Asian countries, it's considered a sign of healthy behavior, meaning that if you have a cold or you're symptomatic in any way, you need to protect others from catching whatever you have. And it's also as well often used because of pollution, high pollution in some Asian large cities in Asia. At the same time, of course, many of these countries also suffered from the first SARS epidemic several years ago, and they learned the hard way the importance of wearing masks. So I think because of these reasons, the long tradition of wearing masks, as well as the experience of having gone through the first SARS epidemic, is I think masks have become more accepted and are part of the norm in many of these countries. This is in contradistinction to the US, where wearing masks is not part of the culture here in this country. And unfortunately, at a time of this pandemic, it's been taken on as a political statement. Wearing a mask or not wearing a mask is now a political statement in the U.S.
I mean, in the UK, perhaps not quite in the same way, but even here, it will be made mandatory in a couple of days, as if to give the population time to get used to the new rules. When it comes to the scientific advisors that advise whichever government on what move it has to take, do you think that the psychology of particular nations and people comes into play, that there's some governments that know that imposing a mask will be harder to do on their population? Does that play a part, the psychology?
It probably does, but I do believe that in the context of a pandemic, what one needs is to always be anchored in the science and the evidence, and to have a consistent message from a trusted messenger, somebody who is consistently sharing the scientific information and supporting the population to do what needs to be done. And wearing a mask has been shown repeatedly to protect others from getting the infection, as well as to protect the individual who's wearing the mask. So we have enough evidence now to say that at this point in the pandemic, that wearing a mask, as well as some of the other measures as well, like, for example, the physical distancing and the good hand hygiene and so on, that it's a combination of all these measures that need to be taken very seriously and need to be adhered to consistently so that hopefully we can get over this pandemic together.
Wafa Al-Sadr, Professor of Epidemiology and Medicine at Columbia University. Madam, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.